I'm going to bring in John Lott Jr., who's on my radio program fairly regularly. We usually talk about gun control and stuff, but now he's got a peer-reviewed paper out that shows revealing excess Biden votes in swing states. John Lott, welcome to the program.
Great to talk to you again, Andrew.
I want to pick up something that I was going to leave off. I was going to try to get to on radio today. We ran out of time, and then I'll circle back. When we look at some of these states with same-day registration, and we see people, and I know this happened in Ohio, and I think it was in 2012, that you see people that are being bussed in to homeless shelters. They are declaring that shelter in the morning their home, and by the afternoon, they're voting. And whenever you bring this up, the people on the left say, you can't even talk about that.
Right. I mean, that's just one of a long list of problems that occur with voting in the United States these days. Same-day registration, it's difficult to kind of check people and make sure that they're really who they claim they are. There are other issues that occur with that, that's just one problem with same-day registration.
Well, let's talk about Georgia and Wisconsin specifically. On radio today, we went over a statistic that there were 28,000 ballots that were either unsigned or improperly filled out, but Biden's victory was about 20,000 votes. So had those votes that were not properly filled out discounted, Trump would have won Wisconsin.
Right. No, I mean, that's just one of many issues that came up in Wisconsin. Many of the normal rules that they have, and even those might not be sufficient, were, forgotten in this past election. They didn't check signatures on absentee or mail-in ballots for much of the country. They were simply overwhelmed with the number of ballots that they had that was coming in, and the normal rules didn't apply. So what I try to do in my research is to try to get an idea of how large that number is.
Your number is somewhere between 255,000 and 368,000 ballots that may have been improperly cast for Biden.
In six states, Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Georgia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
Well, we just went over Wisconsin numbers. I mean, if these numbers are accurate and your study is peer reviewed, it's not even being called into question by critics. Would Donald Trump be president?
I think it's very high probability. The types of results that I get are kind of statistically significant at about the 98, 99% level. I think it's very likely that he would be president if we had the same types of rules for voting that we had in 2016, that he would be president.
Can you? I was reading your paper, and I admit I don't do what you do. Can you explain some of the methodology? Because it seems complicated. Some of the equations that I saw.
Okay. Well, I mean, just so people know, they can go to our website at crimeresearch.org. And the paper's right there at the top of the page. It's forthcoming in a journal called Public Choice. The ideas here are actually pretty simple, I think, and that is, we have certain counties where fraud was alleged, and they're right next to other counties where there were no allegations of fraud. And so what you want to try to do is compare similar areas. Obviously, a place like Fulton County is very different from Cherokee County, for example, in Georgia, or Allegheny County is very different from Westmoreland County. So what you want to try to do is look at the precincts right on the border of the county. First of all, you take a place like Allegheny County, they have 1,323 precincts. So you're talking about fairly small geographic areas that are very homogeneous. And when you're talking about two precincts that are just on opposite sides of the streets, one in a county where fraud was alleged, another one in a county where there were no allegations of fraud, you have to understand that the ballots that were in question here are these absentee or mail-in ballots, and those are counted at some central facility within those counties. So then you had in Allegheny County allegations that the observers weren't allowed to really observe everything that was going on. What you find is that these counties these precincts that are across the street from each other are very similar in terms of the voter registration, in terms of the demographics, in terms of how they have voted in past elections. And again, in 2020, you see very close similarities in terms of the in-person voting. But when you look at the absentee or mail-in votes, you see a big gap all of a sudden emerging in those precincts just across the street that you didn't see in any previous election that was there. You could say, well, maybe it's the get out the vote effort. The thing is, these get out the vote efforts were statewide, and they targeted particular areas, heavily Democratic areas, or they targeted heavily Black Democratic areas. So if I have these two precincts that are essentially identical in terms of how they voted in the past, in terms of registration, in terms of racial and gender and age demographics, both of those precincts would have been targeted for get out the vote efforts equally. And yet, for some reason, you see in this past election a big gap there in absentee ballots. I also looked at provisional ballots because there are allegations in Pennsylvania anyway that when somebody sent in a mail-in ballot and they hadn't done it properly, the county officials in Democratic counties would call up the voter and give them a chance to go and correct it. Now, that's against state law. And the Republican counties, there's no allegations that the Republican counties did it. So essentially, I did the same test. You have these identical precincts across the street from each other. What happens in terms of the provisional ballots? And you find a huge number of provisional ballots extra in the precinct where there was these allegations that the county officials gave people a second chance to vote on these things. And those votes overwhelmingly went for Biden. So if you look at Allegheny and Philadelphia counties, you're talking about something around 7,000 extra votes just in those two counties, just from provisional ballots for Biden.
That's unbelievable. And I know we talked on radio, and again, I got 35 seconds, but you pointed out in Nevada, which is a same-day registration state, that there were ballots, duplicate ballots with the same name, same address, except the first name was Bill on one and William on the other, and there was an excess number of those as well. And, we're told we're not even allowed to discuss this stuff. Just get over it. Biden won. Don't say anything about election fraud or elections being stolen. And when you do this review of this phenomenon of midnight ballot counting of the absentee and drop box ballots, you get a very, very odd picture of these votes. I have to leave it there, sir. That was a great explanation. Thank you for coming on the program today.
Well, thank you for being there, Andrew.
Give me the website one more time.
crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org. They can get the copy of the paper right at the top of the page.
All right. The rant and the gut are next.